Okay, honestly, this looks like a quorum, so we'll go ahead and start rocking and rolling. So good morning, guys. How are you guys doing this morning? Very enthusiastic after 4 days of partying and debauchery and karaoke and stuff. Well, my name's Benyamin Holley. I work at a company called Cyft. I'll go into them in a little bit, but the concept of this talk is how could you build a go-to-market plan in 60 minutes with AI? How could you do it agentically if you just came back from the last talk? And it's something I've thought about a lot over the past couple of years, because the way that people generally build campaigns, marketing, lists, lead building, it's all still like very manual. And in some ways, it really still needs to be. But in other ways, I wonder, I'm like, you know, when you really think about like what humans do, in like, for instance, like ZoomInfo or Apollo or something, like, I think the robots could do it way better and way more efficiently and, you know, complain less. So anyway. Before we get started, I have a serious question. I need a volunteer from the crowd. This is going to be tough. Who has a company, nobody's going to answer this question, but who has a company that they work for that they really didn't like? Because I want to use them as an example. I want to build a campaign for them. Does anybody want to volunteer tribute for a Glassdoor review right now? I just need one URL. That's all I need. Yes?
I don't hate them, but
okay.
in intelligence, they do cybersecurity staffing.
What's the URL?
I think it's just intelligence.com.
Intelligence.com? Okay. And we're going to use them for something. I'm going to show you guys something here in a minute. But it takes a while. It kind of has to like run in the background. Is it intelligence? Like that? Okay. And you'll sort of see this running in the background. Hopefully it works. It works like 90% of the time. Sometimes it'll like get tripped up. And I'll sort of explain Clay and what's going on here in a second. But I want to get back into the thing. Okay, so just a little bit about who I am. Should you listen to me? Well, if you ask me if you should listen to me, yes, I think you should listen to me. As a salesperson, I think if I put any doubt in your mind that you should listen to me, maybe I wouldn't be doing my job. I don't know. So real quick background, I've worked all sorts of jobs. I got into SaaS a couple of years ago. I used to run recording studios. And I didn't know that that was actually my first sales job, running a recording studio. If I had known that that was a sales job, I'd probably still be doing it. I think that's the conundrum that most artists run into, which is they don't know that they're actually in a business. And there's a lot of talented people out there who don't know how to make any money. And so I think I was maybe one of them. I worked at one recording studio that was actually like a music education company, and they had like a software product, but I didn't know anything about that stuff when I was doing it. And so that was actually my first startup, and I had no idea. Today, I work at a company called Cyft.ai. We work with MSPs, so many of y'all probably know what MSPs are. We sell what we refer to as a service intelligence solution to those guys. And I won't really get into all of what we do, but the principles that I'm going to show you guys helped us raise $5 million. They helped us recruit the CTO and the VP of product we poached the VP of product from a big company in the space, and it was like a big win for us, and things like that. So we've had a lot of success doing what I'm going to show you guys here today. And now I'm the head of growth. So head of growth is, so it's like I'm a 10-person startup. So head of growth really just means like absurdly overpaid SDR as far as I'm concerned. But so one of the things we're going to talk about here is the context issue with AI, right? And what happens like when a person who's never used, and this may not make sense right now, but it's going to make sense in a bit about why I'm talking about this. The problem with AI, like if you get your grandma to use AI and she's like, okay, this is cool, like your grandma will actually probably find it pretty cool. So this is maybe a bad example. But if you get somebody who's like never used AI before they're going to have a very different experience than like if I'm using it, right? Because I have thousands of interactions, hundreds of documents. It has all of my data. It's a huge security liability. It knows everything about me. And so like when I ask it a question about what should I do with X, Y, or Z, it can answer in a very different way. And the same thing happens with like sales tools that use AI. Essentially, it's like you have to rebuild the context window every time. And it becomes like very cumbersome. And the tool that I'm going to show you guys today, Clay, many of you, can I just get a show of hands? Like who's actually familiar with Clay? Who's used it before? Who knows anything about it? Okay, so this is a pretty relatively educated audience, but there's limitations with Clay. There's limitations with all of these like workflow tools like N8N and stuff, is that they don't have a context window and you keep having to like refeed context into the next piece of the workflow and it becomes really like cumbersome. It's not like the end state for AI. Right now we're like still early, like messing around with these tools, and these days like I do a lot of stuff in Cursor, I do a lot of stuff in Claude Code. A lot of the sales stuff that I do is in those. And if somebody had asked me to do this talk like a few weeks after I'd been asked originally, this would be a talk on like Cursor and Claude Code for sales. Anyway. And so yeah, I sort of got into like what does the traditional ABM playbook kind of look like? It's like you kind of pull a list, filter by vertical, send them a bunch of emails or whatever. There's a lot of really big problems with this. First of all, the verticals, like they don't really tell you anything. The workflows that like I've built and what you're going to see here in a second, let's actually see if it's working properly. It is. It's like the average company has like thousands and thousands of companies in their CRM, but they don't really actually know anything about those companies past like a URL or something. And what I've done like at Cyft, and I've worked with in the past consulting clients with this, it's like let's take all of the companies in your CRM and like have an agent go to their website and like read the website and like is this company actually somebody who we want to talk to, who we want to sell to? The amount of like garbage data that the average sales team has in their CRM, it's absurd, and it becomes a graveyard. And so like that's what we want to kind of try to avoid. And so what I'm going to show you guys has a lot of use cases. CRM enrichment, like mass CRM enrichment, is kind of one of them, right? And so like for us here at Cyft, one of the first things that I actually did, even before I started working here, was I did a lot of research on the total addressable market, because these guys asked me to come work for them, and I'm like, okay, well I'll go work for it. It was a pre-seed stage startup at the time, so it was kind of a big bet, right? And I'm like, okay, well let me actually see if the market is able to support what their ambitions are, right? Which is the same ambitions probably that every venture-backed founder has, which is we want to become a unicorn and sell our company to ServiceNow or something like that, right? And so I went into Clay. I actually went into a whole bunch of different sources to get all of the MSPs in the world, but right now we're just selling to the Americas, and said, okay, if we can capture like 1% of the market, how big could this company be? And I gathered about 65,000 MSPs worldwide. I think there's probably more. Most of them are really small, so the kind of type of tool that we sell is not super relevant for a lot of these smaller shops. But I think like as sellers, as marketers, a lot of times it really benefits us more to think about things like a financial analyst or an investor than like somebody writing copy, I guess. I don't know. That's how I've sort of thought about things as far as like the data layer of my work on the GTM side goes. And honestly, I think this is a good general principle for like anybody who's like thinking about taking on a new role, because people are like, oh, come work for us. It's gonna be great, whatever. And I think like most people don't really take the time out to analyze the market that they're going to go work in and see if these goals that these companies are trying to hit are realistic or anything like that. But you can do this stuff on your own with a little bit of research, and this will be a piece of that, right? Anyway, so what I built here it was pretty, I guess it was a pretty simple clay table, right? And there's a couple of processes that are sort of simplified just for the purpose of this like demo, right? But basically, the reason I wanted a URL, let's see if it went ahead and worked. So this is clay, and I guess if people don't know what clay is, it's basically, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a no-code workflow builder for sales. It's got a bunch of APIs plugged into it, mostly like surrounding data enrichment, but you can also hook it up to a sequencer or your CRM. Like at Cyft, I have clay hooked up to Salesforce and our sequencer and outreach and all that kind of stuff. And you can just like sort of execute long-form workflows like, I have, this probably isn't like super impressive, but maybe somebody will get something out of this, right? Like one of the workflows I have is anytime somebody fills out the type form on our landing page, we don't ask them, we ask them for their email address, right? And it just the clay goes and finds their LinkedIn, determines if they're a good fit, adds them to the CRM if they're not already in there, enriches other sorts of data. I think this is kind of like table stakes for like sales teams these days, or should be, but I know a lot of folks are still kind of operating on a, I don't know, more old-fashioned type stuff where they, get a lead and, I don't know, hope that it's fine, and don't do any research before they call it. And I was talking to he's not really like an SDR, but the kid who works for me, and he's like, yeah, I didn't even look at the URL before I called these people. I'm like, dude, like, come on. I'm giving you a lot of ammunition to know exactly who you're talking to when you call them. You should use it. So anyway, I guess, like, how do I put it? Like, I've always had this concept that, you should be able to build a campaign just from a single URL, and it's, and in this case, it was intelligence, right? And so what I did in this first table is I had Clay go do a bunch of research on this company, right? And I don't know anything about this company. I'm going to assume that most of this information is accurate. It's usually pretty accurate. So Intelligence's ideal customers are primarily high-growth SaaS and technology companies and cybersecurity firms, blah, 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 blah. So this is like pretty good research. Do you know if this is accurate? Yeah. And so that's one of the things about AI is these days I think it hallucinates a lot less than it used to, but it is still not perfect. And these are all the different sort of like data points that you can pull just from like kind of looking at somebody's website, other sources. And the reason I think this stuff is important is because if you want AI to work in sales, like what I find myself running into over and over and over again is like you get generic AI slop answers from Claude or ChatGPT or whatever. And it's not because like the AI is bad or something, it's because it doesn't have the context that you have spent years and years cultivating. And so in each one of my interactions, I want to hand it this amount of context so that it actually knows what to do, whether it's qualify a lead or write an email or score a deal or determine next steps from a call and all that kind of stuff. At Cyft, we do a lot of like homebrew stuff, which is like totally not scalable, and in 2 years, it's going to be like a nightmare to manage. But right now, it's really cool and fun and novel, and analyzing call recordings and stuff and sending them to a data lake is kind of the stuff that we have fun with. But and so what I had to do was analyze the ICP, figure out who the typical buyer titles are, give me a little synopsis of the ICP. And then what I had to do is go find me just 5 companies, because we're going to extract contacts from these companies. And this part is actually something I really, really dumbed down for the purpose of this demo, because there's a better way to do this actually, and I'll describe it to you. I wish I had like a good visual, right? This piece right here where the AI goes and grabs companies, you could just as easily structure this query as like a JSON and use the Apollo API, for example, to pull all of the companies in this company's TAM, right? And then you would use AI to basically score each one of those companies, say, is this a good fit, is this a bad fit, and you would have thousands and thousands of companies. Now, so why is that important? So first of all, I was talking to a buddy of mine who took on a RevOps role at a company, And classic, the stuff that like venture-backed startups mess up, it never ceases to amaze me. And they were like, he's like, they hired me and they have these revenue targets and we don't even know if the market's big enough to support it. And I'm like, dude, you got to do this research ahead of time, man. You can't take a job when you don't know like what's going on. And he needed to expand their total addressable market. And like, if you don't know what that means, everybody here probably should, but expand the total addressable market that they are aware of, right? And so something like creating a JSON query that just goes and uses the Apollo API to go grab all of that information without you having to like sit there and click through a bunch of, drop-down menus is actually like a way more efficient way to do things, I think. And the robots are way better at that stuff than we are. They're gonna recognize things that we're missing. They're gonna know certain things. And I mean, there's always like caveats to this. People talk about like, oh, we want a human in the loop. We want a human in the loop. And I don't think we actually want a human in the loop. I think we want to give the robots enough context to go do what they need to do, what they're actually good at, what they're better at, some of these things that they're actually better at than us. And selecting a bunch of items from a drop-down menu in Apollo to get the right leads is actually something they'd be way better at than us. If they know what we know, though, that's the caveat, right? And so this is how we're gonna give them what we know. So anyway, that's how I would have done this if I had wanted to go more in depth, but I didn't want to, or else I didn't want to be here for 3 hours. They only gave me 2 hours for this talk. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't want to spend that much time on it. So these are companies that the AI thinks would be good for intelligence. Is this like semi-accurate? Like, could you go sell to Base 10 or PostHog? Yeah. And so it gave me the, URL, basic stuff, a fit reason, SimGrep. That's a funny name. It's a developer-friendly AppSec SAST platform. I don't know what any of that means, so I'm just going to have to trust the AI here. And so what we did there is now I have an accounts table that these accounts were sent to, right? And for this purposes of this demo, I just wanted to grab like 5 of them, but you can imagine if you had like 5,000 of them, you just have a lot more leads. But in this instance, we're just trying to keep it really simple, right? And so this is the part about context that I sort of wanted to talk to you guys about, right? So from the preceding table, this is the problem with AI tools like this as we use it right now, and this is why I'm so bullish on like using Cursor and Claude Code for GTM applications, right? Because you can store like a markdown file with all of the context that you're ever going to need about your business, about your customers, and it's going to be able to apply that to every like piece of a workflow. But like, if you want to do this with more like traditional tools, I don't think you can do this at all really with like Apollo or ZoomInfo or any of the like, I don't even know what you call them, more legacy sales tools, right? And oftentimes what I find, I've demoed a ton of AI sales tools over the past couple of years. And what I find about most of them is that really functionally, they're a clay table with a UI on top, right? And I think that we're really limiting ourselves like if we accept somebody else's default settings, because like when you think about like software, how is software designed? Like software is designed with the software engineers and the product managers and whoever, they give you default settings, and that's how they envision the product like being used. Like that's their philosophy on whatever process they're helping you with. And I don't believe, I know this is going to sound weird, but like I don't believe in their default settings. Like I don't want to use their default settings. I want something with like true malleability, true flexibility, and no code stuff, clay, N8N. Like we're sort of getting there, but I really, really strongly encourage you guys to go check out Cursor and Claude Code. I actually built this presentation in Cursor. I'm not a developer. I'm definitely not a web designer, but I wanted it to look like Windows XP, and so that's what I had to do. But anyway, so like I would feed the next piece of context to the next table, right? And so I fed all of this stuff to this table. and then I asked it to go find buyer contacts, okay? And so again, here you could have repeated the sort of Apollo workflow where instead of like, hey, you know, AI is going to go get some people off of LinkedIn, right? Hey, we think this person or this person would be good. But there's a way better way to do this. Like I said, structure a JSON query, feed it to ZoomInfo, or I don't know if I think you can do it in ZoomInfo, but their API, their API starting cost is like $15,000 a year or something. So, which is a little bit too lush for me, like at this stage. Maybe Series A, I'll get the ZoomInfo API. But you want it to feed it this data before it goes on and does the next thing, right? And so let's see, it pulled 3 contacts, the head of engineering, the head of forward deployed engineering, that's a new one, and the president / GTM operations at base 10. And so it's proposing that, yeah, we go find those people, right? Okay. So there's contacts. We can take a look at the contacts, but right now it's actually, I think it's doing some analysis because I have another section here that asks it to do some stuff. Real quick, I don't think this is like revolutionary or anything, but if you're pulling contacts, I hope that you're validating all of the email addresses with something like Lead Magic or whatever, Million Verifier. I know for our own email campaigns, it's super important for us to know who's got a catch-all email, what MX provider they use, and in this case, everybody here is on Google Workspace, which is a pretty weak security gateway. You know, usually the folks that we're prospecting into is like Proofpoint, Mimecast. They like absolutely, you know, kick my ass when I try to email them anything. So I love it when I see a good Google Workspace because I know that I can send them a message. And that's the sort of like optimization that I like to do on emails too. Like you shouldn't just, this isn't an email security talk, but if you're doing Proofpoint Mimecast customers, it's going to be a lot harder. And so there's like particular ways to structure emails like, anyway, I won't get into all that. But the other thing that I do with this contacts table is send these folks to the CRM. And so Clay has a Salesforce lookup. None of these folks are in my Salesforce, which isn't surprising because I don't sell into any of these people. But if they were, you'd be able to see like the CRM link, all that kind of stuff. This is the fit assessment. This is sort of like one of the problems that I ran into as an SDR is that like my revenue operations team would, this is way back in the day when I was at PandaDoc. I worked at PandaDoc. And I remember I was on the outbound team there, and the revenue operations team, they would give me like a list of people to call. And I would look at the list, and I was like, this list was not created with any sort of logic or rationale. It's like literally somebody just pulled some variables in like a lead finder and like sent me a list. And you can do that, and you could gaslight your SDRs by giving them something like this, so they might actually call them. And what I mean by that is like what we want to do is give people like a conviction around like why should we reach out to this person? What about this company says, yes, I want to talk to these people? And I'm not saying you should gaslight your SDRs, but like when I was an SDR, if somebody had given me like, you know, 500 words of like reasons why we want to call these people, I would have probably been like way more gung-ho about it than like, oh yeah, here's a list and you know, good luck. So you can sort of take a look at what we have here. ShipFox's product, Premiere, faster, cheaper, GitHub Actions, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of a lot of data, right? So the next piece of this workflow, you know, sort of, well, just to go over this real quick, like sort of similar. I want account notes on accounts in Salesforce. Like I don't like having blank account fields. In our Salesforce, for most of like the larger prospects, I have like a bunch of open job listings that we've pulled. I have a bunch of recent news, like did they acquire a company? Did they get some kind of funding? Like I do a lot of very automated homework on these companies that all goes into Salesforce. And There's actually, it's more than just like, I want data for an SDR to use or something like that. Because think about this, right? Salesforce, okay, so one thing is a lot of companies, larger companies, smaller companies too, but like a lot of more forward-thinking AI companies who have like a little bit more of a technical sales team are moving out of CRMs into data warehouses. And I got a funny question a couple of weeks ago from some of the folks on my team. They were like, why do we use Salesforce? And I had to sort of like explain to them my master plan for it or whatever. And they're like, could we just like do this in Supabase? Like if we're gonna use, because everybody on the team uses Cursor, even the sales team. I do all of my Salesforce work out of Cursor. They're like, why are we doing this in Salesforce? The UI sucks, whatever. Couldn't we just do this in Supabase or like Snowflake or something? I'm like, okay, yes, we could. And one day I probably will mirror the CRM inside of a data warehouse so that we can do stuff like, manipulate finance data and product data. We use Metabase for like user analytics and stuff like that. And eventually we'll do that, but right now it's in Salesforce. But the reason that I want things like job listings, M&A stuff, et cetera, even if those things aren't like 100% current, Salesforce, whether we stick with Salesforce or we go to Supabase or whatever, wherever we maintain our customer data and our prospect data, all of that stuff is going to be used as the data that like feeds the AI brain of our company, okay? So that's sort of like what I'm trying to build up to with all of the things that I'm doing here, right? Inside of Cursor, I can just ask questions about what's going on in Salesforce. I can just say like, hey, what's the most common blocker in our deals over 100K? Things like that. Why is this deal not moving forward? Perfectly natural language, but if there's no data in there, well then it doesn't really do us any good, right? And so the same thing for companies that we maybe haven't talked to or whatever. We could be like, you could ask a natural language query like, what are the companies in Salesforce that have the most employees or most technicians, because we can do deep research on that in Claude. It's not super reliable to get, because we sell, the tool that we sell at Cyft, it's MSP technicians, MSP service desk managers, like those sorts of folks use it. So I don't really care like who the CEO is really, things like that. What I want to know is how many technicians do they have? How many heads could we possibly sell to at these companies? And it's something that we take into account when we get a customer. We say, what's our average level of account penetration? And that's a field in Salesforce. And so you could ask things like, I don't know, what's our average level of account penetration? What's the biggest account with the lowest level of penetration? Where do we need to spend our time expanding accounts that we currently have? And so all of that comes back to like, what's the data in Salesforce? What's the data inside of the CRM? And so, growth signals, things like that, right? Like, do we have a customer who has recently acquired a company, right? Well, we need to go talk to that person because they just acquired a company with 40 technicians, which could be quite valuable for us. And to that point, I actually haven't implemented this 100% yet at Cyft, but I would recommend using a workflow like this to quarterly refresh your CRM, because a quarter of your CRM goes stale per quarter. And so what I'm doing right now is assigning a number between 1 and 4 to each account in the CRM inside Clay, and I actually have our entire CRM inside Clay in a spreadsheet kind of like this. It just pulls the Salesforce account record and enriches all of the data. And you can set up a quarterly enrichment. Say, I want to run job postings and news and all that stuff once per quarter on a random number between 1 and 4. And at the end of the year, your entire CRM will have been re-enriched with all of this data. So I know that was kind of a long tangent, but I wanted to talk to you guys to kind of where I was going with this. So Salesforce, this is what would actually just go in for like an account executive or somebody to read on the account level. Strong prospect, base 10 is a high growth AI inference platform. Yeah, I interviewed at base 10 before I got the job at Cyft, and I'm pretty happy where I'm at, but that would have been a cool opportunity because they definitely have it going on. So yeah. So this is sort of like, I guess this is the last piece of this workflow, and all of these concepts that like I'm talking about, so I used to run a lead gen agency, right? And basically what that means is that I spammed people for money. I know none of you guys have done that. But like sending emails, writing personalized emails is like sort of the last piece of this. And I don't know how they turned out because I haven't looked at them yet because we're doing this live. But I had AI write some emails, and I'll show you the prompt that I use and all that kind of stuff. One thing I want to talk about though is that like AI right now, how do I put this? We optimize AI for a dopamine rush a lot of times rather than something that's actually useful. And I think the people who are building these tools to some degree for consumers are also optimizing them for a dopamine rush rather than something useful. And so like before we look at these emails or whatever, I guess my point in saying this is like, whether these emails are good or bad, we'll find out here in a couple minutes. But a lot of times what comes out of like that chat window is not useful at all. It literally, it's just like AI slop and without context, without like direction, a dopamine rush is not useful, I guess is my point. One of the other things that I've noticed about AI, and these are general principles that aren't necessarily my original thoughts, right, is that the people who are really effective using artificial intelligence and doing stuff like this are also the people who are really effective at managing their own teams. Because when you think about it, like what does an agent actually need? There it is, Agentic. Like what does an agent actually need? It needs context, it needs direction, it needs what does good look like. Like these are the things that I try to implement into my prompting to make sure that I get something that's not just AI slop. We'll see how good I did. But and the other thing, this is just something I want to mention. It may or may not be related to this talk, right? Like AI in a lot of ways is kind of like biblical, okay? And so like, what do I mean by that? Is that AI is made in our own images, and for better or for worse, the people who created AI and the majority of content published on the internet was generated by, white 20 to 35-year-old liberal capitalist men. And I'm not saying that is a good or bad viewpoint to have. I'm just saying that that's generally like this how AI was trained, and it biblically sort of reflects them. And in that way, I mean that like they say we were made in God's image and all this stuff. And so the way AI acts, it acts the same way that we do, really. And it's funny because like all of the faults that we sort of attribute to AI, we're like, oh, AI is hallucinating. I'm like, oh, and you're 100% connected to reality, I suppose? Like, you never hallucinate? They're like, AI is just making stuff up. I'm like, okay, well, we should all take a look in the mirror before we like get upset with the AI for making stuff up. But let's take a look over here. And I'll show you what I fed to this table to give it these emails to write. So I gave it everything, right? I gave it the, it doesn't really need the MX record, but it's in there because this is the table where we would then put it into the sequencer for sending, right? I gave it the reason that the company was a good fit. I gave it the pain points that intelligence addresses. I gave it the ICP synopsis, the strategic objectives of the company, which was another field we had it do research on, like what's this company doing, what kind of initiatives do they have going on right now. Targeting notes. Which I guess is like, I don't even remember what that is supposed to mean, but it looks like just notes for targeting. So I'm missing context on the stuff that I actually did. Then I have the product overview, like what does SemGrip do? And so when you think about like, when I think about like the emails that I've sent and have actually written by hand, well, I'll tell you a quick story. One of the biggest customers that we booked since we worked at Cyft, one of the biggest customer that I booked since we worked at Cyft, what I did to get that meeting was I used OBS, which is like a screen recorder, and I went and played back a webinar that the guy who I wanted to talk to did, and he's like the head of AI innovation at this big MSP. Super cool dude. I won't say who it is, it doesn't matter. But and I then uploaded that webinar recording to a transcription tool, and I got the transcript of the webinar. and then I put it into Claude. This is way too much work for one email. Don't do this. It is a really big customer, so it worked in this case, but 90% of the time that I put this much effort into stuff, the email probably goes straight to spam. So I don't normally do this, and I tell people not to do this anyway. And so anyway, I did all this analysis on it, and what we kind of want to do in an email is we want to enter the prospect's mind in the conversation that they're already having with their teams today, which is why I look for recency, news, jobs, hiring. Job postings are actually the best place to get data about a company, because they tell you all this stuff that they would normally guard with their life, what data lake they use and what email security stuff they use. And there's so much information out there about companies that's just public on the internet that you can ascertain by getting, using the header on their, an email reply or something. It's crazy. I'm actually one of the things about email prospecting is it really, really resembles social engineering. And when you think about it, all marketing is kind of social engineering, because you're getting people to do things that they wouldn't normally do so that you can have money. And so I sell to, like a lot of y'all probably do, sell to people who are cybersecurity professionals. And anyway, you have to have a great product, and you have to keep that in mind. People will get upset and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to hack anything or do anything illegal or anything like that. So anyway, moment of truth, right? Let's see how these emails look. So the first thing that I noticed that I don't like is the RE. It keeps doing this for some reason. I've been testing this out for a while, and sending an email to somebody and making it look like it's a reply to something is not good. But when you start working through this kind of stuff and seeing what the AI actually does, you can sort of see why a lot of the faux pas happen with email marketing, because a lot of people are totally relying on AI to do this stuff, and AI, it doesn't really want to do the right thing. It requires a lot of direction. So your team at SemGrep runs AppSec tooling over Google Workspace. Teams at your scale often juggle false positive, triage bottlenecks, and developer handoff friction. I don't know what any of this means. I don't know if this is a good email for intelligence. We help similar security and engineering groups reduce review time by about 20% by tightening triage logic and remediation workflow across the platform. Could be off, but if these issues pop up, open to a quick 15-minute run through later this week. So I would probably rate that at a 6 or 7. It could be a lot better, but for the purposes of this demo, I needed something that would work no matter what random company we chose. So things that could be better, I always try to do things that are presumptuous. How do I put it? We want to presume that we have a viewpoint and an opinion on somebody's business, and that we've actually done some research and we're taking the time out. Now, you may say, you didn't take the time out, you had AI do all this. Well, yes, I did. I took the time to make this clay table, and that's what I took the time to do. And but you want to at least appear that you know something about them. And I think from a human perspective, what happens if somebody replies to something like this? I don't know if I would reply to something like this personally, and that's really the gold standard, right? If I wouldn't reply to an email, then I shouldn't send it. And so when I take time to send emails by hand, they are things that I would actually reply to, like the guy's webinar that I downloaded the transcript and used his own verbiage in the email. I don't remember what kind of verbiage he was using, but that's kind of the power of AI and sales. If there are figures out there, now not everybody does webinars, right? So not everybody's going to have that kind of data to go out there and grab. But there's other stuff. There's cultural, I don't want to say memes. There's cultural artifacts on websites about companies, on people's LinkedIn's that for example, values that a company might be on their website, or they might be on a job posting. And that's the kind of language that we want to grab to get somebody's attention. Because as much as product market fit matters and all that kind of thing, this company that I'm actually talking about, who I sent the email, we had a lot culturally in common. This guy had a lot of the same thoughts about AI that we did, and we're we're on the same page with a lot of this stuff about where we think it's going. how the implementation of AI in the MSP industry is probably going to evolve. That's why we think, and for an early stage startup, a lot of times that is kind of how you have to get people in the room. You have to say, listen, we might not have a fully baked, mature, enterprise-ready product, but culturally we're aligned, and we think you should talk to us because we want you to have access to this when we change everything, right? So let's take a look at one of these other emails. Yeah, I don't like the quick follow-up. I don't know what that means. I specifically asked, let me actually show you the prompt. That would probably be more helpful. So you are a skilled SDR and direct response copywriter who moonlights as a private detective. You will generate a succinct 5-line email to the contact specified using only factual information available in the referenced data source. And you can see what data was actually referenced, all of this, right? Keep the body properly capitalized and punctuated under 150 words and include a single minor humanizing error either in the subject or the body, not both. You guys might not like this, but I really do believe this, that if you're going to use AI for communications or posting content or whatever, you have to humanize it somehow. And kind of like the Torque guy, whose talk I love, by the way. I love Torque. They're awesome. They're in the same industry as us. They serve MSPs as well. Think about your inbox, right? Every message is properly capitalized, is properly punctuated, has a nice signature, is verbose enough to, explain whatever the product that these people are pitching to you is. How could you be different? How could you do something different? How could you get someone's attention? Well, you could at least make things appear to be human by adding some spelling errors or punctuation errors. And there's other ways to do that, right? That's just an example that I'm using here. And anyway, the story I was going to tell is I had this client one time when I was running my agency, who I did this for. And when I worked with clients back then, I did not ask their permission to do stuff like this. And, better to ask forgiveness than permission. And usually it worked. For these folks, it didn't, and they didn't really, anyway, we weren't like a good fit because they didn't have a truly differentiated product. Kind of like, they were saying at the Torque Talk, right? The Torque Talk. In order to do marketing, in order to do sales, you do have to really have a truly differentiated product. You have to have something amazing. Like if somebody sends me an email into my inbox, in order for it to get my attention, it has to be literally, I'll put it like this. When I worked at PandaDoc, I asked the CEO and the CTO and the VP of HR or whatever, I was like, hey, because I was a new SDR and I kind of wanted to know this stuff, I'm like, what would it take to get you to respond to a cold email? And they said, well, Ben, you would literally have to appear to be reading my mind with whatever we are dealing with at that very moment. And so that's kind of why I do what I do, because I do believe that when I think about myself, there are a lot of things right now that I'm dealing with at Cyft where if somebody emailed me and I'm going to solve your Salesforce adoption problem, right? Classic problem. I'd be like, okay, well, all right, let's chat about that. What do you got? And I remember, whenever I make cold calls to people, anytime I would book a meeting, people were like, oh, well, I don't usually take cold calls. I don't usually book meetings with people who call my cell phone. Well, of course you don't. Nobody just takes calls with people who call their cell phone, right? But if I the way I view cold outreach is if I'm looking for people who are trapped on a set of train tracks and I want to push them off of the train tracks. And if somebody pushes you off the train tracks, whether it's I noticed you guys aren't SOC 2 compliant or whatever, you're gonna want to chat with them. I don't know, I would think so. Just out of courtesy, right? If somebody throws you a lamp and a genie, you're gonna wanna talk to the genie a little bit, right? So that's kind of how I view cold outreach. And a lot of people, it's hard. Most people aren't going to respond to you. Most people are going to be annoyed to a certain degree. Some people are going to be rude, which is fine. But the people who you actually connect with and when you start a relationship and get a customer and actually solve their problems, all the other stuff doesn't matter, right? So we can keep going down this prompt. So factual. reference only factual details. Subject line formatting, subject must be entirely lowercase and feel like an internal memo without sounding spammy. And so what I mean by that is like, I think, I want to say this in a politically correct way. Some of my more experienced colleagues do still send emails like as a group rather than slacking me. But being a spoiled millennial, I'm like, why would you email me? Like, just send me a Slack message. But that still does happen, and especially a lot of bigger companies, email is still a more like prevalent way to communicate. And so if you had something where it was like, oh, ops bottlenecks, you don't really know what an internal memo kind of looks like, so you kind of have to do some guesswork, but that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. Do not say I was impressed. I noticed your LinkedIn or any subjective admiration. When I talk to my Eitan, who's the kid who works for me, I always tell him, like, do not glaze people in emails. Like, we do not want to be glazing anyone, because he's 22, so that's the verbiage that he's familiar with. And so here you can see an example output. You always want to, again, the same principles apply with management as they do AI. If you tell somebody to go off and do something and they don't know what good looks like, well, good, whatever results you get back are kind of on you, and sometimes it is fun to like give less experienced colleagues like a task without explaining anything just to see how they'll do, and then they come back and they have like some Frankenstein monster thing. And so anyway, the same kind of thing happens with AI sometimes. It is fun to like experiment. There's other stuff you can do in Clay, like they have document context. This is, I know we only got 5 minutes left, so I'll try to hurry it up. And we're actually done anyway, honestly, but I'll sum it up, right? That context, let me go back real quick, actually. This context thing, this is like sort of the problem with Clay, with all these tools, is like this document context. I don't want to upload a document context. I literally would have to do that for every AI column. And you can make a template too and like speed this stuff up, but I don't really want to do all that. Like I want, I don't run a Legion agency anymore, so it's just Cyft that I'm using this stuff for. But like I want that context every time, and so with a Claude project, with a Claude code, that context exists natively. You don't have to like retrain the AI on stuff. Okay. We already talked about that. Talked about what Clay is. Talked about that. We talked about Clay's big limitation. It doesn't have memory. Yeah, I think I was talking to a friend who was an early investor and like shareholder at Clay, and he was telling me that like he had a very specific, pointed conversation with their leadership about how Cursor and Claude Code and these like coding agents are going to start replacing these sort of like workflow builders in that regard very soon, and that Clay should kind of take notice of that. Because I think like the RevOps teams of the future are not going to log into Salesforce. They're not going to log into the CRM. Like they're going to operate everything from a chat window. Like I don't want to log into Salesforce. I know you guys don't either. I tried to set the log out time to infinite in Salesforce, and it turns out that they will not let you do that. The longest time that you can go without Salesforce logging you out automatically is 12 hours. And honestly, it's a terrible security practice to have a forever open Salesforce window. I'm pretty sure that's like not SOC 2 compliant or something. So let's see. I have a Google Doc with a link to this table that I'm going to send in the WhatsApp group. I meant to have a QR code up here, but I guess it didn't work. So anyway, listen, we got 2 minutes left. I know we ran through a lot of stuff. I really appreciate you guys. It's been a great audience. If you have questions about this or anything I talked about, get with me after the session. So I think we'll probably wrap it there. So thank you guys.